Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. Isaiah 58:12, NIV. Welcome to Outreach Connection, focusing on topics and issues that reach our communities with the love and power of Jesus Christ.
And welcome, my friends, again to another episode of the Outreach Connection. I'm Dr. Pepper, shaking the salt. And we are to be the salt and light, of course. So today I have a salt and light duo with me. I guess it's been several months since my producer and the station manager, I started to say stage manager here, came in just bounding and saying, oh, the walk to Emmaus, it was just wonderful. And so I didn't know what she was talking about. Well, now I know, and I understand a little bit more about it. Here with me to explain this and to invite you and to add a little humor also, I have with me Steve Bunch, correct?
Correct.
And Lynn Gallagher.
Lynn Gallagher, nice to meet you.
Gallagher.
Yes.
Oh, now he should be one of the comedy guys. Gallagher, of course.
True. There you are.
Oh, wow. Well, I've already said the humor part, so you have to start out, Steve, and tell him what your humor is first.
Our humor? Well, it's we have a little skit that we do.
And who's we? It's not you and Lynn.
No, it's another gentleman.
Okay.
His name is Doug, and we are Superman and Superboy, but not your typical Superman and Superboy. Ours is spelled S-O-U-P-E-R, and we have this little skit that runs about maybe 3 or 4 minutes.
I bet you could do longer than that.
Well, we have.
I'm sure.
if needed, but it's just a play on different aspects of wisdom, that everything we expound on is actually showing that we are anything but wise.
But you think you are, and that's what makes it funny.
Right.
They're kind of witticisms type things.
Right, yeah.
Now, I'm thinking you do some puns and some plays on words. I'm an English teacher, so there's a word, and I can't remember it, but I just learned this new word. It's like a plexioxymoron or something like that, where you have one part of a sentence that begins and then another part that's totally opposite than what you thought. Tell your mother-in-law when that was a good one.
Mother-in-law, well, and I would use it if I was performing. I would say that on the way here today that I was almost late because I had received a call from some friends that informed me that 6 men were beating my mother-in-law and wanted to know if I could be of some help. And I told them no, that I thought 6 should be enough and I wouldn't be needed.
Ba-dum-bum, ching! Do you have a drummer that's in the background doing that?
No, we don't, but usually as it builds.
And there are some that you have to think about when you say them. Do you get some where the people are like this and then, oh, I get it?
Oh, yes. The best way to make headlines, Deborah, is to sleep on a corduroy pillow.
Ah,
you have to process that one a little bit.
Headlines. Oh. Or in my case, on my iPod cord, I often wake up with a little string there. Now, you're obviously the straight man that's come along for the ride.
I am the straight man. I'll just do as I'm told. Yep.
I always like to get to know the men behind the story. So I guess since we start with wit and you're the other half, that makes you half-wit. Oh, this is going to be a good one. Okay, so Lynn, sorry. Tell us a little bit about you and what you really do.
Well, what I really do is I grew up in the grocery business, and I've been in Quincy for 20 years, and I retired from Hy-Vee food stores, and then I got involved in a church plant, and so we started a church a few years ago, Life Point Bible Church. I was very instrumental in starting that, along with some other couples and some other people, and so for the last 4 years, kind of been nurturing that along and spend my time there. We're ran just as a lay church, so we just have one hired staff. Dr. Bill Barker is our teaching pastor and elder, and so I spend a lot of time with that, but I too have been involved in the Walk to Emmaus for a number of years, and hope that we can encourage some people and tell some people about it.
And people, of course, are going to be invited to this, and we'll give all of the information, but as my audience knows, I always love to hear the story about how somebody came to Christ. So did you grow up in a Christian home? Did you know Christ at an early age?
That's a great question. Yes, I grew up in a Christian home, and I can remember 8th grade Bible camp, a camp that I'd been to the year before, and the second year back was, to me, it all made sense, and it was like a moment that I could just say, Christ, I accept all that you've done, and from that point forward, really, I've tried to live a life that would emulate Christ and be Christ-like. Doesn't mean I always have, but at least from that point, I've tried to emulate my life like that.
Wow. So you weren't one of these that had to stray and become the wild child?
You know, I hear all those stories.
Yeah.
I have 3 kids ourselves, and we've been able to avoid that.
Yes.
I'm not going to say that that's common or uncommon.
Right.
I'm just going to say I know both sides of the coin, and no, I didn't have to experience a prodigal son story to realize that Christ was real for me. So.
And that is really, as a retired high school teacher, one of the children that was not a child. He was actually a junior in high school, and he was a letterman, and he was, you know, just very popular and very handsome and very involved in his youth group. And Danny Pettis was his name, and so we had a before school group that met called Unconditional Love, and people had gotten up and told their testimony. And so one day I said, Dan, you haven't given your testimony, and you're one of the big leaders of this group. And he said, oh, Mrs. Peppers, I don't have a testimony. He said, I got saved at a youth camp. I never have had a cigarette in my mouth. I've never had a beer in my hand. I'm saving myself for my future wife, and I don't have a testimony. And I went, duh, hello. That is the testimony everybody needs to hear. And so yours was kind of like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Similar, I guess.
And your children, you were able to be a good example. And
you know, so far, our daughter is 23 now. She's going to school in California. She's actually just got her master's degree. And she goes to Biola, and it's Rosemead School of Psychology. And it's very Christian-based, and that's very uncommon in that psychology world, so to speak. Right. And so she's hoping to move on to a PhD, and we'll see.
Good.
Time will tell. And she enjoys it. We get to see her as often as possible, which is a little less all the time, but she's still in California, and our 2 boys are 18 and 21, and they're both at home still, attend John Wood, and it's just a joy to have them around.
Good for you. Yeah. And you haven't mentioned the one person of your family.
You're right. You're right. My wife and I will have been married 28 years next year, and we moved to Quincy with Hy-Vee, and yet it's all our kids have known, so Quincy's home to us.
Good.
We're originally from North Iowa.
North Iowa.
Yeah,
okay.
And we both grew up there, and my wife's mom is still from there, and we enjoy getting together with her whenever we can, and that's our background and history.
Well, our time is up, Steve. It was nice having you on. No, just kidding. I wanted to hear your story, too. That was great. He said it very succinctly. I mean, you get a picture now of who he is and what he was like.
Yes.
Okay.
If I could add one more thing.
Okay, sure.
We have an ecumenical Bible study, 7 different churches.
Good.
And we were looking for a place for all of us to meet. Lynn opened up his church. When we were looking, Lynn basically said, here's the key, we have plenty of room.
Wow.
We've been meeting there for a couple of years now, I think.
Excellent. So you're practicing what y'all are preaching, huh?
We try to.
That's good. Yeah. And where is it located? Let's give a plug.
We're at 1739 Harrison, the corner of 18th and Harrison here in Quincy.
18th and Harrison.
Yep.
And everybody is invited? Anybody?
Absolutely. 9 o'clock every Sunday morning.
Every Sunday morning. 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Nice and early.
It is.
And you get out at 4 in the afternoon?
You know, we have a good teaching time till about 10:15. We take a short donut break, and then we have Sunday school for all ages, adults.
Oh,
we have a nice teaching time from 10:30 till 11:15, and so I would say plan on spending the morning, and we'll have a nice time.
Excellent. And what about your home church?
My wife and I and our family attend the Crossing. You want a little bit of our
Sure, I would love to hear. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Iowa.
Okay. But you didn't know each other.
We didn't know each other back then, no. Keokuk, Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
We moved to Quincy when I was in the 3rd grade.
Okay.
And I think our church history would be that we were hit and miss as a family. You know, always Easter, Christmas, we're all familiar with that. And it wasn't until I was 17 that I had an encounter with Christ that changed my heart. And I want to say not my head, but changed my heart. And
where were you and what happened?
Well, it was kind of a rock bottom moment when and I said, you know, I didn't know if there was anyone in this world that could possibly love someone like me.
Wow.
Now, and you know, sometimes we might get the picture of someone that, what were you into drugs? Was it alcohol? No, I didn't drink. There was never drugs. We never smoked. I wasn't perfect, but it wasn't that type of a story. It was just a lack of feeling love in my heart. And I cried out to God at that time and said, I don't know if you're real or not, but if you are, I need to know, and I need to know now. And I was in the basement of our home, and up on a bookshelf was a real small red New Testament. And and I picked that up, and I sat down in the chair, and I just opened it, and for about the next 2 weeks I spent a lot of time down there with the Word. And I have to tell you, that encounter, as soon as I opened right to Matthew and started reading, it wasn't words on a page. It was arms around me. And,
the scales had already been dropped off of your eyes because you had already said, God, if you're real. And this is the difference. Somebody out there, maybe you're watching right now, you've heard two different ways to come to Christ, two different ways that they came to Christ from different backgrounds. Those of you that know mine, I was the wild child and the lost one, and on my third suicide attempt cried out to God. Wherever you are and whatever you're going through, God will meet you right where you are. And that's why we want these wonderful gentlemen who have shared openly already about their hearts and their families. I want them to tell you about an opportunity that you can have on a walk, a very wonderful walk. We did not get to hear about your family yet, though.
Oh, well, we have 4 boys. One lives in Florida. Just recently had a new granddaughter. We were there 3 weeks ago. We raised 4 boys, and now we have 4 granddaughters.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, we're having the time of our lives with them.
I bet.
We are very close to our other 3 granddaughters are here in Quincy.
Good.
And our oldest son lives here, and we go to church together. On Sundays, our early service there, all of us together. We pick up the girls ride with us to our house and or their house, and we have dinner together. And that's, you're right, it's a family day, and I really feel blessed. And they also initially were going through a period of, where do we want to go to church? There were different faiths involved as far as denominations within the family, and they were having trouble making up a decision there. It was on a walk to Emmaus that I was at the altar for 2 hours on a Saturday night, because they had not shown up for church for a few weeks. And I just prayed and said, I don't care where they go as long as they know the truth, and as long as the Word is in their heart. And that next morning, my wife called me and said, I wanted to let you know they came to church that morning. So
well, you were gone.
Yes, yeah, and I remember a pastor coming to me on that weekend and saying, "Are you okay?" Because I'd been at the altar for such a long time, and I just said, "I have something really important on my heart that I just want to spend time with God." And on another weekend, I actually got to. This is not a normal occasion for, let's say, a father or a parent to actually be on one of these weekends with their children. It happens, but it's kind of rare. I actually got to be on one with 2 of my boys. And it was a Saturday night that we lost track of time just praying and witnessing together. And I told them, I said, if the process that we think is going to happen, that Dad's going to go first, and I said, it's not up to us, but if so, I said, I want you 2 to know that of anything you've ever given me in my life, this time we've spent together is the most valuable time I've ever had. And, we were all in tears, hugging and praying, and we talked about eternity. We know our time here is important, but we also know it's brief. And
right.
we talked about the fact that our love will go on in eternity with our Father. And
that is amazing.
It was a wonderful time with them.
You know, I feel like we're making this sound so simple and so joyous that, you know, nobody experiences trials or problems or testings before, during, or after this, right?
I'm going to tell you one of the best scriptures for me to relate to is Paul saying, "Why do I keep doing the things I don't want to do?" So no, it's you know, it doesn't make us perfect, and we all know that. I just on a weekend 2 weeks ago, similar to a walk to Emmaus called a Cursil,
yes,
a man who's been involved for a long time. I'm going to say 15 years with that, and he and I sat together and we happened to share some scripture together, and he made a comment and said, I really hope when my time comes that I'm good enough. And
wow.
I said, you know, Bill, let's take a look at what God's telling us about that.
Oh my goodness. He thought he was still working his way to heaven.
A little bit there. And I think it's something that a lot of us get caught up in it first. Right. You know, I hope I'm good enough. And you know, we don't have to hope for eternity. We can know. And so he and I, we opened up the scriptures, and I shared some scripture with him on that weekend, and you could just see his eyes being open. And I'll tell you, that's a joy. And I know, Lynn, and you experienced that too. When someone, you know, recognizes the Word of God for the truth that it is. And those things happen all the time on these weekends. On these weekends.
Now, let's tell what the weekend is. And for those of you that have been watching and listening, no one is perfect, and our robes are as filthy rags without the righteousness of Christ. But if you're a Christian and you're agreeing with me, great. But if you're listening to this thinking, what is all this garble and this Jesus stuff? And so what is the walk? And I know you've had me already open up to Luke, so I'll just tell you the way that this is scripturally. It's right after the resurrection. On the very first morning, the women took the spices, they prepared, they'd gone to the tomb, and he was risen. Then they remembered his words. This was as the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men. And when they came back from the tomb, they told all of these things to the 11 disciples that were left and to all of the others. It was Mary Magdalene. This was the lady with the alabaster box that I can relate to, that had to pour it all out because of the sin in her life. And then, bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves. He went away wondering what had happened. And that was, of course, was that James? I didn't back up here. Okay, now, that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus. And what happened? Just put it in layman's term.
Okay.
You know, as they're walking along, Christ joins them, and they don't recognize him. And they're just talking casually, and they're becoming more and more intrigued. And it isn't until the end that really they realize this was Christ. He was walking right here with us. And so in the story, it's just they're fascinated, and yet their fascination turns into this really was Christ. He was walking with us, and that's the Walk to Emmaus weekend. And so I would say the similar type thing happens. A person comes, and as I would tell people, just open yourself up and come, and really don't have any expectations.
No preconceived notions.
No, don't have any, and just come and be prepared to enjoy yourself with whatever happens. And time again, I'll just tell you, of different people that we've sponsored, there hasn't been anyone that hasn't said, man, that was the best weekend I've ever had.
I've heard that over and over. My parents have been on one. I've never been on one. My husband and I seem to get different weekends where we're not together, but it doesn't have to be together. As a matter of fact, explain how this works with men, women, youngsters.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, we have men's weekend and women's weekends. They run from, and in fact, we start tonight with the men's weekend.
Okay.
We'll start about 8 o'clock. Those who are coming for the first time will show up around 7 for myself and some others that are working. We'll get there about 3 o'clock. There are literally hundreds of people involved in preparing them. There are a lot of little jobs that are done to And their point is to make it the best experience that they can. God's in control of these weekends, and He's in control of the hearts.
You do the outline part. Yeah.
That's everybody is involved with that, and that's where the joy really comes in.
So when people say, part of it you don't want to give the whole thing away because it is so special, but what do you say when people say, well, what am I getting into? This is a whole weekend. That's
a great question, and I'll if I could back up just a little bit. I covered my boys and I covered me, but I hadn't spoken about my wife yet.
Okay.
I went on the weekend. It was 11 years later that she went on the weekend. There's a reason for that. She picked me up. When I came out of that weekend, I was not the same person.
Right.
We had just recently married. So we were a newlywed couple. And what happened to the guy that she married? It wasn't that she didn't like it. The fear at that time, there were some things that had gone on in the world that her fear was it was a cult, because I was flying high and I was a changed person, and that scared her.
Sure.
It was something that I just had to pray about, and it took some time. We went on a marriage encounter weekend, the two of us, and which we both absolutely loved, and I was able to tell her at that time and sort of communicate to her that this is what it was. Cursillo at the time. Cursillo Walk to Emmaus. This is what it's like. Only it's just you and God that are there. It's not the three of us. It'll be the two of you. And she went that Sunday night. She's a great witness for this. 11 years she sort of fought it. That Sunday night when I picked her up and just tears, and she said, "I am so sorry that I kept you away from this for 11 years. And I said, no, you didn't keep me away from it. It was alive in my heart. And I said, I always prayed, and I knew the time would come. God is faithful. And I said, now we move from here. This is our day that we move forward from with this. She actually completed all of her terms of service. There is a limited amount that you can do in a certain aspect of the weekend as far as witnessing, and she completed it way before I did. So the opportunities came her way.
And how long ago was that she went?
I went 35 years ago.
Okay, so hers was something like 20.
It was about 24, 25 years ago.
And since then?
We have both been very involved. We're on the board for Central Illinois Emmaus. There's a board that...
As you are, Lynn, right?
I'm not on the board.
You're not on the board, okay. And so when you say on the board, what does that mean?
Well, it's representatives from Central Illinois. Some live in Springfield, Quincy, Bloomington, Decatur, around the area. And we meet just like any board does over any program, anything it is, and then we make decisions. And
where are these held?
They're held in Springfield the first Tuesday.
Are all of the walks held also in different places?
Well, there are walks in Springfield and walks in Quincy. Okay. There are two sets of walks, and where we were started here, I guess, with the men's and women's. And there are two sets, of January, February, here in Quincy, and then we actually have two in July. The men's is this weekend, and in 2 weeks the women's weekend.
So it doesn't take a huge amount of your time during the year. It's just enough to renew and reinvigorate you.
It's a community coming together at that time. There are some of us that, it's a year-long thing that we're involved from an aspect of administration, so to speak.
What do you say when there's a spouse, and maybe, I don't know, Lynn, did your spouse go as well?
She did.
Okay, later or before you?
You know, it was similar to Steve's, but it was in a much shorter time frame. She went the following month, and that is kind of how the program is laid out. Like I went, and when I came back, and I was similar, I went to a Cursillo event, which was very similar to the Walk to Emmaus. Went to it for the weekend, came home, and my wife says, tell me all about it. And I said, well, I'll tell you all about it if you're not going to go. But if you're going to go, why don't you just go and experience it? And that answer really wasn't what she wanted to hear. But through a matter of trust, she finally she went, and when she came back at the end of the weekend, she was just blown away, as most people are. And it's great because it doesn't matter where you are in your journey. If you're a young Christian or you're a mature Christian,
or single or married,
you're going to have a nice weekend. You're going to enjoy it, and it's going to further you in your journey.
I love that. And what else can we really tell, other than first we want to make sure we've been putting up the information on the screen so that folks can see that, but what else can we tell about about how they can either get involved, know more about it, feel more secure in the thought of going, or get a sponsor?
Here's the way I would relate that, Deborah. Let's say that I was going to get you a special gift.
Okay.
It wouldn't be much good if I said, here's what I'm going to get you, here's what I'm going to spend on it, here's everything about that gift before I give it to you. Well, when I give it to you, it kind of ruins the surprise element.
Surprise.
And that's the way it is, and that's what Lynn and I are kind of referring to here, is that sometimes people why is it so secretive?
Yeah.
Well, it's not secretive. It's just
You're not members of the Masonic board or lodge.
No, we don't want to spoil the gift.
I know.
So I can tell you this weekend what's going to take place is we're all going to gather tonight. There's a team involved. They tell who they are. They know who the team is. And our purpose is to make it the best experience that we can for the person that's coming the first time. They're referred to as pilgrims. They're making a pilgrimage, so to speak.
But you're not Mormon.
No, we're not. We're not.
I'm playing off of your witticism. Go ahead.
And we will all get together and have a time of kind of introduction to get to know each other a little bit. And then there are a series of 15 talks. One builds on the other, and it's a journey. It's a walk.
And who talks?
Lay people and clergy.
Okay.
This ministry, and Lynn and I have talked about this, is it's a ministry that's lay-led and clergy-supported, not clergy-run and lay-supported. So it's a little different in that aspect. And as
real people, though, helping real people is what it is.
I can reveal that one of the talks I gave was I was on a weekend, and I knew the talks are prepared in advance. I knew going into that weekend something was missing 3 or 4 weeks before I was to give this talk. During that time frame, our third oldest son was involved in a very serious accident. A semi went over their car. We were called to the hospital. He wasn't breathing when they brought him in. He was on life support. And we were there at the hospital, my wife and I, and the community, people from the community. They only allow 2 people in ICU. There were 25 of us. Just praying together, and we just were able to turn that over because it was not within our power to do anything. Well, the miracle occurred. He's fine today. He went from that experience in that ICU, and within a couple weeks was on a weekend.
Wow.
And we got to share that experience together.
We need to understand that, too, that sometimes it's the tragedies and the trials and the tribulations that God uses. What the enemy meant for harm, God will use for good.
And I knew then what was
missing.
That was your
talk.
That was... so
I would love to hear more of this. I know you all are just thinking, well, what is it? I want to know. Well, we've been putting the number up again. If there's anything that we left out, we've got 48 seconds left.
There was a gentleman that I approached at church this week because I thought he would like. I don't know anyone that wouldn't. It's kind of like Lynn and I've shared. I know people who have said, I was approached 5 years ago to do this, and I kept putting it off, and finally I went. And every time, Lynn will back this up, I should have done this years ago. It's the most wonderful experience of my life.
Don't say those same words. You be the one that decides that I am going to give this an opportunity, give this a try. Here's your phone number again on the screen. And it also gives the post office box 13244 in Springfield. Now, who will they get with this? With the box number.
As far as that is our...
that's your board.
That's our board,
okay. Well, I just want to thank my guests. You all are amazing. I can see that you're amazing husbands, fathers. What could you have been had it not been for God walking with you, our Lord, all the way? And He'll do it with you. I'm Debra Peppers, Shaking the Salt.
You've been watching Outreach Connection. If you would like to contact this ministry, you may write Outreach Connection, care of CTN, WTJR, 222 North 6th Street, Quincy, Illinois, 62301.
WTJR, licensed to Quincy, Illinois, maintains a public file for public inspection at our studio at 222 North 6th Street in Quincy, Illinois. Hours of our studio location, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and 9 a.m. to noon on Friday.